Good morning, everybody. We're going to start in a few seconds. Um, while we're admitting people, if you feel so inclined to introduce yourself in the chat, please do so. Good afternoon, everybody. You've joined an IMP webinar on um, which we've called Now What? And we actually switched the subtitle after we talked to the IMP marketing people to the much better subtitle, Finding True North When Everything is Going South, which we think far better captures our state of wonderment and confusion um, through all of this craziness. Thank you for joining us today. Um, so your host is the Independent Museum Professionals Network, which is a network that provides resources, knowledge, and connections to people who are working as independent museum professionals. So we support IMPs, we strengthen the relationship between independent museum professionals and museums and our clients. And we like to think that we advance the field generally. So our panelists today are Marsha Semmel, who's the principal of Semmel Consulting. I'll give you a little more about her when we start with her. Michelle Moon, the principal of Saltworks Interpretive Consulting, and Shiloh Holy from Accession Grant Writing for Museums. I'm Laura Roberts. I'm going to facilitate, and I'm joined today by my partner in crime, Kashmir Morley, who many of you know from prior in program. She's one of our loyal Zoom gurus. Um, so I need to stop the share and turn things over to Marsha. We invited Marsha to talk about what's going on in DC to the extent to which any of us know what's going on in DC, because Marsha is the ultimate DC insider, having worked for virtually every federal agency and is as well as many other things in her career and keeping a keen eye on what's going on. I do want to say before Marsha starts. Marsha and Avi Dector, who's here today, are the authors of a pandemic volume of essays written primarily by younger museum professionals with our late colleague Ken Yellis, who passed away on Friday. So I just want to acknowledge the passing of a very valued and talented colleague and friend. So, Marsha, what's going on in DC?
Oh, well, thank you, Laura, for that. And also thank you for acknowledging the passing of Ken, who was really a giant and incredible inspiration to me long before change the museums and change got started. Um, I don't, and I also noticed that Bob Russell is on the call, and he might have some interesting insights about NSF funding for people who are interested in that particular agency because he's been tracking that. I guess what I want to say about what's happening in Washington is uh, what gets attention and press and is not so wonderful and happy for us especially regarding erasing U.S. history and creating a kind of false or heavily doctored narrative about our country, as well as canceling grants, that have anything to do with DIAI work. But what's happening underneath, so I think we all know that. I'm not going to talk about that. What's happening underneath is that things are still getting funded at the cultural agencies, at IMLS, at NEA, and NEH. Some of you probably noticed there was an AAM press release just around before Thanksgiving. The injunction around the IMLS that was filed largely by the American Library Association has been sustained. And it not only for the 21 states involved, but for all of these grants. So many of them have been restored. IMLS staff has been greatly reduced. Yes, money has gone for some trucks that are taking, a great white man view of American history around the country. But at the same time, something like 400 other grants were made before the end of the fiscal year and the government shutdown. And if you go to a website that's called USA CAPS, USA Spending, one word, .gov, you can find every single award that's been issued by the government in the last fiscal year. All the Save America's Treasures Awards, most of the African American Museum Awards from IMLS, many of the Native American awards, many of the museum professionals in the 21st Century Awards. So I guess what I want to say to you is, depending on who you're working with and the nature of the project, this might, you might have a chance with some of these federal agencies. I was at an event the other night and talked to a senior program officer. The NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity for the current fiscal year. Everybody's on continuing resolution, right? Because there's no budget. But that is being worked on at IMLS. They're hoping to post something in January. Um, the peer review system has been compromised in many ways, but it's still happening. I know it's still happening in NEA and NEH and IMLS, despite the fact that most of the NEH advisory presidentially appointed council was fired. But I was at an event with some NEH people who are still there, despite the reorganization of NEH into different divisions and the greatly reduced staff. And this person was having a review panel that weekend. So you need to, and I don't know how much of this is going to be posted on any of these websites, but if you go to usaspending.gov, you will see what awards were made and for how much. So even at NEH, despite the Garden of American Heroes or whatever it's called, the greatly reduced staff and some big grants to organizations like this group called Tikva, which is definitely a very right-wing Jewish organization, and that was the largest grant ever made. Things are still getting funded. I guess the other thing I want to say is that I know at IMLS, the acting director, Keith Sonderling, who's in the Labor Department, he's come to appreciate a lot of what IMLS does. And so staff have said, again, I don't want to paint a rosy picture, but some of the projects, I think he is going to be a booster for. Again, same. So the review process, weird, not comprehensible, not necessarily rational, not even necessarily according to the evaluations that people are giving, but something is still happening. The last thing I will say is that the Marianne Carter, who's the acting chair of NEA, she managed to squirrel away enough money so people were not laid off during the shutdown. And NEA is on pretty solid territory. That's not to say that every project will get through or anything, but there was a 60th anniversary of NEA commemoration a couple months ago. Marion Carter was part of the celebratory video about the chairs of NEA. So maybe let me stop. Why don't I stop there? Um, I welcome questions that people have because um, I've got a lot of information here. And again, I apologize, it's anecdotal. It's not the official.
Well, I think anecdotal is the best that we're going to get, and I think Bob Russell has said that he's willing to pipe up with what he knows about NSF. But there is a question that it's been hard to find information about what's getting funded at IMLS. So is usaspending.gov
Yes,
a better
that's where you have to
source?
go. Everything was exacerbated by the shutdown, but I
Uh-huh.
don't know how public they were going to make it anyway. And there was a conversation going on among staff and thinking about the grantees, like how public do some of these grantees want to be? Because how public even the agency wants to be about some of these awards. I don't have the answer. I can't get in the heads of people, but it's and the staff. I think there's a lot of anxiety, obviously, and uncertainty among the staff that seems to be calming down a bit because, did they take the fork in the road memo? Did they leave? Did they decide to stay? Was the sword of Damocles hanging over their heads? Are they doing the right thing in staying under this regime? A whole lot of issues and questions. So, if you do interact with staff who are still there, be kind.
Always good advice. Um, so Marcia, I want to ask about the and Shiloh, maybe you want to help answer this question too. The tactics of grant writing in this market. And does it work to use belonging and welcome instead of diversity? Does it, how good are the bots at these agencies at picking up um, the the projects that might in fact fly in the face of um, the administration's priorities?
Yeah, well, I definitely wouldn't use DEIA. However, there is the Civil Rights Act of 1964, I think, which nobody is tampering with that now. So that is about inclusion. It is about rights for everybody. So, and that's what I would do. I wouldn't necessarily even change the focus of the project, but you want to make it as inclusive as you can make it, which is probably something most of us are striving for in any case.
Uh-huh. And what about the mood over at the Smithsonian with the review that's supposed to be done, right?
It was supposed to be done at the end of the fiscal year. I'm not sure what happened. I was just at an event with several high-level Smithsonian people, and they are kind of muddling through this. Uh, they're going forward. Many of them, many of them wanted to clarify that some of the label reviews that were going on, and not just at NMAH, at American History, were already in process anyway. So. Um, And I think that they have been looking at language and thinking that maybe some of the language revisions that are not quite as academic and jargony are going to be good for everybody. So, things are still happening there. And again, there's no budget, so we don't know whether for something like the Museum of the Latino in America, what's really going to happen with that because people are still working the Hill. And I haven't heard that there's been a change in the regions at all. So that's something that I've been curious about because there were supposed to be some changes, I believe, in last month in November. I don't know what's happened with that. You know that Lindsay Halligan, who was assigned to be the kind of chief censor, she's gotten in the news with other things like the Comey and Letitia James cases. So I don't know that she's been able to give as close an eye to what's happening at the Smithsonian. And whether someone has moved in behind her, I don't know. Library of Congress is doing well too. The person in charge is a 30-year veteran of the Library of Congress who people like. And
This
Carla Hayden is now at the Mellon Foundation,
okay.
as is Cindy Landrum.
This was the assistant to the assistant librarian who they managed, who basically barricaded himself in the office and said, I'm not going."
Well, and he met people like Todd Blanche at the door, and just said, "This is our legal remit, and thank you, but no thanks."
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, none of this stuff is settled, and you've probably followed. Kennedy Center now is getting a lot of scrutiny by the media and is not doing well, as you probably know. So, the play continues to unfold.
And Congress has launched an investigation into the use of funds
Yes.
at the Kennedy Center under
Right. Sheldon Whitehouse. Right.
leadership. Um, Bob Russell has put in the chat the best source of informal STEM funding, a link at the NSF about funding opportunities. So I guess those opportunities are still there if you're sharing that link. Great.
Yes.
Um,
And just one last thing in terms of NEH, again, there's a reshuffling of divisions. A number of people who had really good jobs at NEH have landed on their feet with other really good jobs. So that's also been good to hear.
okay. Before we turn it over to Michelle, are there any other questions from the floor? Okay. Tamara, thank you for reminding us about the recording. I think we had not done that, so the recording is going to be um, imperfect, but we're all imperfect. So let's see. I'm going to go back to sharing the screen and turn it over to Michelle. This is a slideshow. This is what the reason Michelle landed on this panel, although there are always many reasons. Michelle in New Jersey, a talented interpretive planner. But also those of you who might remember at the end of COVID, AAM did a series of publications, and Michelle did the publication on how we're all coming out of this sane and whole and strategies for coming out of this sane and whole. And so I think she took the same approach to producing these ideas about a year ago when we were all losing our heads. So we've invited her here to um, update her thinking about how we can all exercise some resilience in the face of all of this trauma.
Thank you so much, Laura. And really pleased to be part of this webinar today and the great work IMP's doing, bringing us together. And Marsha, that was really interesting and somewhat hopeful, and really welcome any opportunity to feel that hope. Yes, to pick up on what Laura said, what this document, this slide deck that I'm about to very quickly walk through, was crafted in the aftermath of the 2024 election when we were indeed losing our heads. And I found a lot of my clients and colleagues wondering, how to orient ourselves, knowing that change was coming, but not specifically knowing what those changes would look like. And in fact, I think our imagination failed us in the rapidity and the sweeping nature of the changes that we did see, at least in that first several months where we were kind of reeling and rocking with the impacts to agencies, the questions we had about funding, and so on. And this is the product of a lot of those conversations. Many people contributed ideas, and it's meant to be a tool to help organizations that we work with orient themselves and kind of get grounded and ready to face whatever might come. And I think so. I hadn't looked back at it for a bit, and it was great to do that to prepare for this presentation and see, where we were spot on and what are the new wrinkles that are emerging. So, Laura, if you want to just pop forward this next slide, we'll go quickly through this, unless I can advance them. I don't know if I can. No. Okay. So this was about preparing for the new administration. Now we're really into surviving the changes that have come. But I also want to talk about we are not only dealing with the realities of the presidential administration, but we're dealing with economic impacts. People are, justifiably very concerned about their own household funds. And their opportunities and opportunities for education, for leisure, all the things we're involved in. We're always surrounded by climate concerns. We're just in one of those complex times where there are multiple factors that people are finding challenging. So it's not just about surviving a political time period that poses challenges for cultural orgs. It's about really addressing every kind of crisis that we find ourselves in. If we go forward, this was really 10 topics. And the first was about helping each organization just get centered, kind of get their head back, and begin grounding in who we are and what we need. And I think in our time period, it's particularly important to be concerned with how our people are doing from the board to the front-facing visitor team and really be sure that we're taking as good care of people as we can within our constraints and within our institutional roles, but really thinking through how we're treating our team. There's a link in here, and I will share everything I talk about in the chat when I wrap up. There's a link from Andrea Jones, an amazing consultant, with kind of a group, an exercise people can do on paper or in a group to just kind of calm down and separate anxiety from fear that I think still has a lot of value. I also think that the more we're grounded in our institutional purpose, the less important political division needs to become. So we are going to have multiple viewpoints. There may be people in every institution or on every board coming from different angles. But that if we're really resourcing ourselves with institutional purpose and culture, we can find common ground there to work from. In the next slide, kind of reviewing where we were, all still looking pretty relevant, that we need that internal clarity, knowing who we are, what we're here to do. And then moving forward, kind of touching back, if we go to the third one, there are calls for organizations to really know what's going on and reaffirm the structures and funding situation that exists in each organization. So one of those requests or thought points was to prepare for impacts to funding. And as Marsha described, it did happen. It is happening, but it continues to evolve. And it was really interesting to hear how, rather than a complete black hole, we've got a complex situation, but one that is still generating funding support. So an update to this would be to become aware and do that research Marsha suggested to see what is making it through funding and how we can take advantage of that for meaningful projects. In the next slide, this one really speaks to America's 250th, which I know is increasingly in our visibility. We watched the process over the last few years. I think many of us started out with grand hopes that there would be a wonderful, well-funded, centrally coordinated celebration that we could plug into. For all the reasons that didn't happen, but the silver lining to that, and I credit some work at President Lincoln's Cottage for helping kind of shine some light in this direction in a convening they held. The silver lining is we get to define what we will do as organizations and as people working with organizations. So it would be really great to encourage any clients you're working with now to firm up their plans. If they've not done anything and they intend to, it's time to really shape that and make sure that it reflects the commitments institutionally that they'd like to make, and essentially be proactive and insulate themselves from anything that may, be a politicized reaction. So now's the time to get those presenters nailed down. And if you had, if they don't have ideas and they're kind of frozen in, paralysis, there are lots of resources they can point to. We can point them to. So I just want to call out a few here. The Smithsonian Made by Us initiative to reach out to youth and Gen X and Gen Z and Gen Alpha has produced some great stuff, really simple, kind of ready to implement programming that could absolutely be an America 250 project. ASLH has a program handbook compiled by Kristen Gallus with great ideas from all angles on how to program around the 250th. So again, off the shelf. Please check out Educating for American Democracy. They have a We the People initiative ready to roll. The Youth 250 program, which is part of Made by Us, also has a great toolkit. And I just wanted to call out a podcast called This Day. It's an American history podcast, and they actually have an America 250 Watch newsletter. So you can sign up for that, and they're covering what's been happening around 250 initiatives, both in the sort of political side and then how it's being interpreted and experienced nationwide. So lots of resources for you, and I will drop links in a follow-up. So moving right along, we're going to take advantage of the 250th. This is the thing I really, really wanted to, I've been preaching this to everyone I can talk to, and I had a moment, a conversion moment where I got to go through a program with a terrific political consultant in New Jersey who I really want to work with our people in the museum world. He works in general with nonprofits and emphasizes the importance of using the political system. So some tools that I've learned that are so important. Every organization we work with and we ourselves should be active in the political system. We need to recognize who our representatives are, let them know who we are and what we're doing in all the ways we can, whether or not they're friendly or perceived as friendly to you or your organization right now. You are still a constituent and you have constituent power and need to be able to use that and keep those lines of communication open. Going to the next slide, and I'm sharing this image from Oliver Morales, the consultant. He talks about our tree of influence, an incredibly useful idea where we take our own resources, those are the roots here, and think about how we have influence at the municipal, in some cases, the county, some states, the state, the federal government, and the boards of education in our communities, all of which deserve a strategy from us that we are maximizing our connections, our participation. We're showing up at commission hearings. We're filing letters of support for legislation we want. All those things are within our realm of possibility. If you go to the next slide again, this is a sort of a spreadsheet that Oliver taught us to use that I've been using quite a bit, where you essentially, after every election, fill in who those new people are. And importantly, on the right-hand side, what is your closest connection to that individual? What do you have in common? Did you or someone in your family go to school with them or go to the same school? Do you have a shared interest, a shared cause? Because those become outreach points. So I just want to encourage everyone to think about that and recommend to your clients that they think about who is in their tree of influence. Great resources popping up in chat. Thank you. And similarly, your agencies. So I had a big question mark on our federal agencies here. Now, we know a little more about that thanks to Marsha's presentation, but be in touch with these agencies, track what's going on at your state, county, municipal level, as well as these federal levels and anyone else you work with. Moving on, just trying to keep moving on. I want to highlight resources from the National Council of Nonprofits and also probably your state nonprofit association. Spend a little time Googling both of these up and see what's on their agenda and what resources they have. This is a community we belong to, many of us, and should take advantage of that. Moving on to the next one, I just wanted to this is a screenshot right from the front page of National Council of Nonprofits. These are things they're working on that are important to us. So you can see they're doing legislative tracking, they're doing issue reports. This is great stuff to take to your board, to print out, to share, to sign up for updates on, because these all affect our working environment. So please visit them. And moving on, our local relationships, just highlighting to put your arms around your peers, your community partners, whether or not they're in the same sector. You may belong to a heritage or arts, collective organization. or you may belong to a more general nonprofit organization. Whatever it is, create more relationships because we are understanding that acting in coalition, acting as a sector, highlighting our impact, these things become more and more important in the funding environment that we're facing, the funding and kind of audience environment. And popping along just to our final one, our final two, using your voice, remind your clients and you yourself that they are able to engage in advocacy for their own survival, for their own impact. It just needs to be nonpartisan. And there is an art and science to doing that that is easy to learn about. And you can lobby for the legislation that will help. So keep aware of that. And finally, keep yourself connected. So if, for example, you don't live somewhere where there's a group of people doing similar work, doing organizational connection, start one yourself. Have a meetup, call a group together, have a Zoom discussion. Just what are you doing to survive? How can we help one another get through? Um, so if we can just pop ahead, there's one final slide going through my stay strong because I know we can get through this, and that's what history tells us. Your work is important and needed. And then finally, I wanted to just have one little mention in this final slide about what to do for you, just for us as independent museum professionals. So things that we've been talking about in my professional groups are looking beyond the usual suspects for funders, look at some private foundations, community, family, corporate, look at business incubators and small business promotion programs, see what the state has to offer. You may find there are other sources for your clients and your work besides the big federal agencies. For your client list, don't forget our work is valuable in the private sector. You know how to interpret, you know how to design, you know how to create engaging spaces, you know how to apply for funding. That's useful in higher ed, it's useful in the business world. Don't count out restaurants, don't count out colleges. You may find that you have unexpected client opportunities. There are things you can do beyond consulting contracts, like use your skills to offer tours, to run a course for the public or for other museum professionals, create toolkits, create downloadable resources, audio resources, videos. Keep close with your clients. Everything you learn, like what we just learned from Marsha, that's fodder for you to share and keep your clients informed and encouraged. Also be connected with our sector. Take a look at the Freelancers Union. They're not an actual union, but they're a resource group for freelancers. Think about hybridizing your work, which is what I do. I have some W-2 income working in a university program. So I'm, keeping my eggs in different baskets. And I find that's been a real stabilizer through all of this. And then, share your resources. Keep your take subscriptions from places that are putting out information and share that back with your clients and your colleagues. So these are just some survival ideas that I've had. I see lots of great chat ideas coming up, so I'm going to dig into that now. And I'll stop here. And just on an encouraging note, there are lots of things we can do to be resilient, and we know how to do them. So let's bring all those skills out of the toolbox.
Thank you, Michelle. It's always wonderful to hear your positivity and your optimism. I just want to add the two, we as a museum field, we're totally outclassed by the libraries in the IMLS fight. And I think we need to look to what they do and frankly, how ALA operates, because we wouldn't be where we are without the libraries. They were the real heroes, I think. And similarly, I've been finding Americans for the Arts an incredibly useful resource. Their emails, their convenings, their legislative updates. So if you come out of children's or history or science museums and you're not a regular on the Americans for the Arts mailing list, I cannot recommend it strongly enough.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm looking in the chat for actual questions. I'm not finding a lot of questions. I'm finding some interesting comments. Somebody asked about the state humanities councils, and I'm very familiar with the state humanities councils. Some of them have faced closure. because all of their money comes from the feds. The ones that have had a diversified income stream are managing
That's
um,
right.
to work that. Mellon Foundation came through for them as well with a very big chunk of money that many were able to use as match as a challenge to get more private funding. But it's a very challenging time for state humanities councils, which is particularly tragic with the 250th coming up, right? Because that's who we were able to count on for things like 250th programming.
And just in perspective of the humanities versus arts comment that Marsha made, it seems to me that most states have the arts agency written in their budget and supplement NEA funding, whereas not many states have the Humanities Council written in on their state level budget. So it's been more dire when they have lost the NEH trickle down funding.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
then
and in terms of IMLS, just to follow up on what Laura said, uh, part of the lobbying power of the ALA is because IMLS funds the state agencies in each state.
Yeah.
So you've got an army of people ready to fight for the cause in a way that's not always the case with the humanities agencies.
absolutely. And Shiloh, the oddity, the reason that you see this inequity is because the arts councils are state agencies and the humanities councils are 501(c)(3)s,
That's right.
which goes back to their enabling legislation.
Ah.
So the now how much the state puts towards their arts council is very different. So Michelle has put Michelle has left the resilience agenda on Canva because she said she was going to update it. And I'm glad I finally provoked her to update it. But
I do
it's
need to
it's
fully update it. After today, I'll have more fodder.
it's a great resource. So questions for each other before we turn it over to Shiloh? Okay. So Shiloh is a former client. It's wonderful when you have clients who impress you as much as Shiloh impressed me when she was at the Morris Jamel Mansion in New York City. And she has since had to relocate to Detroit, where she set herself up as a grant writer. And what brought Shiloh to my attention is not just that she's a friend and former client, but if you were to follow her e-blasts, this was a woman who was bobbing and weaving week by week, trying to figure out how to have a good consulting practice. So everything that Michelle was talking about, Shiloh has done, and managed to keep her business, I think, pretty successfully afloat. So advice about continuous reinvention, Shiloh.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Laura and Michelle and Marsha. It's been great to hear different perspectives and learn a little bit more about this ecosystem that we're all operating in. I'm going to give you a very brief, like my 30-second IMP journey to set up some background and then pivot to how my consulting practice has changed in the last year or so. So I was a former executive director at a historic site in New York City. The pandemic happened. I became a new mom. My husband lost his job, all the things. So we ended up relocating to Michigan, to the Detroit area. And I was looking to, as you know, typical employment, not really finding what I was looking for. I was kind of burned out of being actually in a museum. And so I stumbled across a training program of how to become a grant writer and how to be successful with that as starting your own business. So I started that training as I was winding down and working remotely as the director of Morris Jamel. It took 9 months to hire my replacement, so I was working remote for about 6 months of that and flying back and forth from Detroit to New York. Um, Sorry, I have a Teams call. Um, and so I slowly started dipping my toes into consulting and really started leaning into it about 2 or 3 years ago. And I I was really trying to build out what I was offering as a consultant, my subject matter expertise. And one thing really hit me, which is one part of this training program, it was that you need to rely on what you refer to as your $5,000 hour. What can you charge $5,000 for that someone would pay that to have an hour of your time? And that's when it really clicked. I am a lifelong museum professional. I have only ever worked in museums. So I worked in them for about 15 years before jumping to consulting. And so I started rebranding my business, my general nonprofit grants writing consulting firm, into Accession Grant Writing for Museums. This happened to happen in January of 2025. So the launch of my new website was actually the same week as the first federal funding freeze. And I really had to almost automatically double down and lean into this change of what I thought was going to be a slow rebranding. I was going to pick up a few different museum clients over the course of a year. But the more I thought about it, the more I felt like I really needed to be a part of this moment that my clients were facing and just this ecosystem shift. And I started a newsletter, and not only to become a resource and to share what my clients were going through, be a central font of knowledge and get sources and news articles and all that compiling, but it was also a marketing tactic. And then in my subsequent trainings with some business coaches, I was using the newsletter to be what they call a know, like, and trust. So I would issue grant announcements when they came out. So we have a method where if we know all of our subscribers' states, so we can be very specific about if a grant opportunity comes out in your state that's open for museums, and we send it just to those people in those states. We were also just recycling information from colleagues and this and that. And throughout this, I started reframing my services. I've been doing a lot more grant prospecting work versus grant writing this year because a lot of clients have seen shifts in their funding. They no longer have that IMLS grant that they were working on for multiple years. And just as a consultant, I really kind of took my coaching to heart, and which was to drive and increase your revenue as a consultant. There's four ways. There's essentially four steps that you're doing. And I just started leaning into this. So the first is to niche down. So that was my pivot to do grant writing just for museums. The second is to streamline your offers, which for the most part, that means reduce the number of things that you're offering to sell to people. The third is creating systems around that so you can streamline your day-to-day work. So everything is kind of a rinse and repeat when a client comes in. You kind of know how to pace them. It's this, that, and you can easily off and onboard them quickly. And then the fourth is to hire support. So I currently have a part-time business manager, executive assistant, and then I have contract grant writers, and then I also have someone supporting me with monthly marketing tasks. So over the course of 2025, my sales have increased 32%, and my profit has increased 25% from 2024. So as a lifelong nonprofit professional, I've just really leaned into these strategies and kind of let someone else who knows about business and commerce like take the wheel. I'm fully in it. I want to make more money. This is like a massive ecosystem shift for all of us. So I was really struggling with how to weigh my client priorities, how to feel like we all feel like we have to fix the world, but then I'm also running a business. Um, and I think that's pretty much it. I mean, it has been a very wild ride this year. I just kind of before the webinar, I was doing some quick math, but we in 2024, my business had 86 deadlines. That's usually grants that we wrote or reports that we wrote for clients. And in 2025, it has jumped to 170. So we've almost doubled our workflow in 2025. But we were still able to raise not quite $2 million for our clients this year in 2025.
Wow. Thank you. Every time I've thought about hiring someone, I've thought, I don't want to be responsible for somebody else's livelihood. And
Yeah.
do I have to take work that I don't really want just because I need the cash to pass along to somebody else? So what's been that trade-off?
For me, it's been a sense of freedom. I knew when I wanted to move to consulting, I wanted to have a better work-life balance. And I can do that by creating by through my systems, I have standard operating procedures that I just pass on to my executive assistant. She knows expectations. She knows, like, she's been with me for about 2.5 years now, close to three. Um, and so, we've set up workflows so she does certain things. So I can come in and I do client sales. And then she does a lot of back end work with setting up grant applications, onboarding them. And then I step in and do the writing. And then she does the submission. So we're kind of like we have this volley, but I'm not personally responsible for doing 100% of a grant application that comes in, which frees me up to take on more clients, and that's where we have really seen our growth in 2025. We've been doing more shorter engagement versus longer retainer work, which is what we were doing in 2024.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. One of the things that you said to me a couple months ago was that you were, and I saw it in your newsletter, that you were shifting even within the prospecting
Yeah.
business. You were sort of micro adjusting exactly what your offerings are. How do you make that decision and how do you communicate it?
Um, that's a good question. I think, you know, our 2025 was crazy, and I was almost to the point where I was getting to that burnout phase too. Right now we have 12 clients right now, which is a lot. And I'm trying to make our engagements and my clients in my contracts be with less clients but deeper work, because I feel like we work more efficiently like that. We're able to get better results with clients instead of just coming in and doing quick search in a grant database and like be like, here's the 10 funders that you should apply to. So we're still using our prospecting package, but building it in different ways to where we're having a longer engagement with clients. So we're able to work with maybe 5 or 6 at a time versus 12.
So instead of doing it as a not a loss leader, but as a come on, it's now part of your core services.
Correct. Yeah.
I remember encountering a good friend of mine, and Marsha's, Gail Anderson, when she first went off on her own, and she handed me a business card that had like 6 bullet points on it, 6 services that she provided. And she's a talented and wonderful person. She was fully capable of doing all 6. But I looked at it and I said, come back to me in a year when you decide which of these you're actually going
Yeah.
to do. Because, among other things, somebody once taught me that our clients don't actually believe we can do 6 things really excellently.
Yeah.
They believe we can only do a couple of things excellently. Now, that said, Michelle has 2 very different practices, um, your interpretive planning and your culinary consulting, but you've got a reputation in both. So I guess it's not really a compromise. I muted you, Michelle.
But I certainly have thought about that idea of niching down and streamlining. I think the mix works for me. And because, there is a demonstrated history in both avenues, I find clients come from different directions. So they're not necessarily comparing the two offers. They're coming for that one item that they know my work for. So far they've not fought with each other. Sometimes they inform and enhance each other, actually. And so it's working so far, but I've certainly thought about the advantages of really, focusing in on one or the other offer. Just have not taken that step yet. And Shiloh, it sounds like you benefited a lot from business coaching, and I'm curious about that. And did you find that it was all applicable to you, or were there some things you had to set aside and say that's not really appropriate to the field, but here's the piece I can adapt? I'm curious about how you benefited from that.
Yeah, so I'm currently a part of two coaching programs. One is specific for grant writing businesses. So I just have my niche of museums in that subset, and that's been 100% applicable. And the other one is more of a marketing, copy editing, coaching program. So that's more for service providers or if you're selling products online. Some of that hasn't been a one-to-one thing, but I think I have benefited from both. And again, I've just decided to lean into it. Like sales still feels really yucky to me, but I feel like I've also been able to get to a point where I feel comfortable doing it. And we're hosting a webinar next week and hoping to get a few new retainer clients out of that. But it's a mindset shift because I've only ever worked in nonprofits. I can run a nonprofit, but running a business is totally different. And you really do have to lean into those traditional sales techniques to make it work if you're trying to meet your business goals.
It's a great point. It's a great point. And so Bob asked a question which exactly illustrates your leaning in conundrum, which
Yeah.
is, do you help clients with strategic planning in relation to grants, anticipating what funding would be needed in the future? I've seen a whole lot of development people turn into strategic planners.
Yeah. I don't plan to chase that money. I do the strategic planning money. If I have an existing client that needs a strategic plan, I will work with them. It's a separate engagement, but that's only because they ask me if I do it and I don't advertise doing it. I also do help some existing clients with just general fundraising. I'm a certified fundraising executive, so some of my retainer clients, they have a bucket of hours that they can use for like annual campaign or major gift strategy. But that's really kind of an add-on thing and not our central core offerings.
Okay. So you do allow yourself to be somewhat distracted.
Sure. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Shiloh is, by the way, a great strategist, so it's to be expected. Um, so Carrie asks, I found that people come to me for my core services, but once they know me, they ask if I can take on other projects. They want someone they know and can trust. If I can't do what they ask, I happily pass them along to a colleague I know will do a good job for them. So that's probably something all three of you have had. Marsha, I'm sure that happens to you.
Yes. Yes.
People know you well and think you can do everything because you can.
No, no. I mean, I think you've been great in terms of being very specific about what you know I can do and pointing me in those projects. So I totally agree. I was going to just say one other thing. I think it's really important to follow the things like the 250th, and I thought Michelle's slide was great on that. I also think this may be a time for museums again to go back to some of the core needs they have, which are not at all controversial, but they need them, whether it's conservation or any or other kinds of capacity building, because at least the signal we've had is that these agencies are going to have money. So, and they're going to be spending their money. So, again, just another thought to keep your eye on as we start getting a few signals from some of these organizations.
I keep trying to keep in my head that great picture of Michelle Obama hugging George Bush at the opening of the National Museum of African American History and Culture.
Laughing, and they were
Laughing
laughing.
and really enjoying each other and being happy in the moment of this shared accomplishment. It didn't last, but the way that the Historical Society of Washington, D.C. got the Carnegie Library to open the City Museum was by hiring a Republican lobbyist.
Yeah, and we would not have a National Museum of African American History and Culture if it weren't for Sam Brownback, who was not by any stretch of the imagination a left-wing um, member of the Congress.
Yeah, it's
Things happen.
yeah, exactly. Uh, any other questions from the floor, or else we're gonna wind up and explain what comes next, because there is a next chapter here. If I can find to it. I first want to thank our panelists and thank Kashmir, who's been working behind the scenes.
Yep.
This is a job I often do, and I know just how hard it is. So thank you, Kashmir. So we're going to try something. A week from yesterday, next week, we're going to do some office hours at noon. We'll be back here. New link, different link. Here's the sign up link, and Kashmir will drop it in the chat, just for an open conversation about what you're thinking, feeling, worrying about, sharing ideas. This is something that our colleagues at NAME did during the pandemic. They did office hours and people enjoyed it. And we on the IMP program committee have thought about it back and forth, and we decided this was a good opportunity to try it out. So please join us back if you want. If you've got colleagues who missed this, who said, "Oh, wow, I really wanted to talk to those people," invite them next week and we can talk to you then. Please keep in touch. The website is indiemuseumpros.com. We have an email. You can put your phone up to the screen right now and scan the QR code and get to our website. We are on Instagram and LinkedIn. We have departed from Twitter, but we are on Instagram and LinkedIn, so you can follow us there. This is entirely a volunteer-driven enterprise. We all work very hard to make it a peer-led, peer-supported network. Please send us your program ideas to indiemuseumpros.com. Please contribute to the listserv, sign up for the listserv, become a member. So we will be launching a membership program, an actual membership program, sometime in the new year. So look for that. But in the meantime, you can just join the listserv. It's a great listserv. Some of you may know that we used to be a professional network at AAM. When AAM dissolved the professional networks, we went off on our own. And so there are two listservs. There's the AAM listserv and there's our listserv. I happen to think our listserv is better, much more helpful, and a great source of peer support and help. We do surveys for all of our programs. It'll give you a chance to not only tell us what you think, but to give us program ideas. So again, there's the URL, or else you can scan the QR code. So what's coming up? Follow-up office hours next week. And then once a quarter, so twice a quarter, we do webinars, and once a quarter, we do what we call IMPs Connect. And so it's next month is the IMPs Connect month, where Ed Rodley and Cass Holman are going to help us think about being more playful in our practice. They've both written books recently about the value of playfulness. I'm really looking forward to it. And so it's a different time than usual. It's at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And then the program committee is working on programs for February and March. Maybe it'll be about diversifying your expertise and or your clientele, or a real cloud pleaser, understanding the insurance landscape. We can't be sort of philosophical and pie in the sky all the time, as Shiloh taught us. We are, in fact, trying to run businesses here, and we've got to remember that. And insurance is part of that. So thank you. Thank you again. And I hope I see a lot of you next week. I would say same time, same place, but it's not the same time and it's not the same place. Any last words from our panel? Words of encouragement?
I just hope as many who can make it will show up for next week because I just learned so much from hearing from other independent professionals, and I know just by the chat there are a lot of great ideas out there. So please come with the open floor and just share with us what's helping you and what's the landscape look like from your point of view. It'll be a really good opportunity for us all.
Yeah. A lot of
Great.
wisdom in the room.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your day, and maybe we'll see you next week.